I am Janell Reardon, and this is today's Heartlift with Janell. Today, we are going to talk about journaling and how critical journaling can be to our mental and emotional and spiritual health. We're talking with Jennifer Dukes Lee, author of Stuff I'd Only Tell God, a guided journal of courageous honesty, obsessive truth-telling, and beautifully ruthless self-discovery. Jennifer Dukes Lee is a best-selling author, a thinker, and question asker from Iowa. Her friends say they are scared to sit alone in a room with her because they end up telling her things they never intended to say. She is both proud of this fact and also a little annoyed by how nosy she can be. Boy, do I relate to that. Follow Jennifer on social media at Jennifer Dukes Lee. And share your journal pages with her. She wants you to do this because this is a very interactive book and an interactive program on your favorite channels using the hashtag Stuff I'd Only Tell God. She writes this in the intro to the very first part of the book, the central repository of all the people who have been a part of my life. You are the sum of a lot of things, your parents' DNA, your personality, your culture, your choices, your habits, your victories, and your struggles. You are also shaped by every person who's been a part of your life, every person who's cared for you, every person who's hurt you, every person who's prayed for you, every person who's abandoned you, and every person who's loved you. Sometimes people are with you for a day, some are with you for a season, and some are with you for a lifetime. Each one leaves an imprint on the person you are becoming. When you take time to think back on those souls, you can learn a lot about why you are the way you are. You can also learn a lot about the kind of human you want to be from here on out. It can take a bit of courage to encounter some of those people on the pages ahead, especially if they've hurt you or if you can never see them again. But this exploration is part of your healing and central to your becoming. As the faces and names emerge, some of them will bring you sorrow, and some will bring you unanticipated joy. And you'll remember the way they made you laugh and how they looked after you. You'll remember the secrets you've shared, the promises they've broken, and the forgiveness, yes, the forgiveness that has brought you this far. Take a moment with each soul, remembering the mark they made on you and the mark you made on them. These are your people.
Sometimes the story we tell ourselves is not really true. Sometimes the story others tell about us is not really true. Here on today's Heart Lift with Janell, we are going to learn how to rewrite our story. So pick up your favorite pen and journal, grab a cup of something delicious, and start your heart-lifting journey towards living a meaningful life.
Let's welcome Heartlifters, Jennifer Dukes Lee. Thank you so much for being here to help us begin a guided practice in your guided journal, because I think your journal, Stuff I'd Only Tell God, you can't get it done any better than you've already done it. So I just want to introduce journaling to the audience. But first today, welcome, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being here.
This is so fun. We got to have a little conversation beforehand. And I feel like we are long lost friends and we finally found each other. I love it.
Oh, I think so. I know. I don't know how I know you, but it will come to me eventually, other than probably your books, because you have written so many beautiful, beautiful books and offered them to us. But today I want to dive right in because it's very important this summer to really be able to talk about journaling and why it's such a beautiful meditative practice and discipline that will bring us great fruit. And eventually, I believe, I've journaled my whole entire life, helps us get to know ourselves. And when we know ourselves, as the ancient theologians have told us, we have to know ourselves before we can know God. And so it will help lead us to a closer, more intimate relationship with God as well. So why this book and why now? I am so curious. A journaling book.
It is. I would have never expected that I would write something like this. I have
Really?
written a lot of other kinds of things, news stories. For many years, I was a newspaper reporter,
Right.
books, Bible studies, and this idea came together in 2020,
Ah,
and people started journaling a lot more. It was just a
they
time
did.
of reflection. And there were some stories about that, about how people were journaling so much. And I started to think more about my journaling habits and how that has helped me through many difficult times over my life. And I also began to think about my love of questions. And
Oh, the
so
reporter.
those two things came together, like how journaling had helped me grow closer to God and to understand myself better, but how also I was really good at asking great questions to news sources, and sometimes to a police chief, sometimes to a presidential candidate,
Yeah.
sometimes to somebody who was trying to get into the Guinness Book of World Records. I mean, just really
The
weird
gamut,
stuff. I mean,
full gamut. Right.
it's the full gamut, right? That's the
Yeah.
life of a
News
reporter.
reporter. Hmm.
So I was good at asking questions of sources. I was also good at asking questions of friends, even strangers. Like I can just get into a long conversation with somebody in a grocery store or in an airplane. I began to think through some of the questions that I think are really fun to ask people that reveal things about the other person,
Yes.
but also just the deep, deep questions that I think we're all longing to know the answers to.
Yeah.
And I put them all together, and you end up with this book, Stuff I Only Tell God. And I keep saying this actually isn't my book, it's your book, because depending on who's
Right.
going through it,
Yeah.
what this thing is going to look like will be entirely different.
It
Yours is
will.
going to look different from mine, from
Yeah.
anybody else. So it's been really, really fun to put it together.
Oh, it's amazing. Do you think the light bulb just went off for me that your reporting background absolutely would inform this and inform your journaling, because at the source of all of it is asking the right question at the right time. And that's what you're doing in this book. It's so cool. So
That's
many
such a
questions.
Yeah, that's such a good way of thinking about it, and it's true. In this sense, especially, I left the newsroom about 22 years ago, and
Okay.
we moved up to the farm. My husband's a fifth generation farmer, which we could make a whole nother
Really?
podcast out of that.
Oh my gosh. And
Yeah, but when
remind
we
us where
moved,
you live. I can't remember.
Iowa, Northwest
That's right.
Iowa.
You're in Northwest Iowa.
Yeah. So
Wow. A
when we moved
generational
up,
farmer.
yeah, since 1870, they've been farming here. But when we moved up here, I'm like, I don't, there's no more newsroom for Jennifer. And at that
What do
time
you do?
yeah, what do I do? And so I began to interrogate the Bible in the same way that I had interrogated sources, because I was in
Mm.
a real crisis of faith at that moment. I guess you would call like maybe an agnostic. I don't even really know. I
Okay.
wanted to believe, but I just couldn't like
Hmm.
quite reconcile earthly logic with stories in the Bible. And so I
Wow.
began to interrogate the Bible and really kind of interrogate God. And what I
Wow.
discovered then were these really rich answers from God. And I encountered Jesus in the Bible, who not only asked really great questions, but also
Yeah.
didn't seem to shy away from other people's questions. Like that's
Right.
how we get so much of the gospel, is because there were people coming up to him saying, what's the way to eternal life? Or
Right.
how will we know the way? And he says, well, I am the way and the truth and the life. And then flipping that around, he would ask people questions like, why did you doubt? Or do you
Hmm.
want to get well?
That's one of my
And
favorites.
yeah. And
Hmm.
so, I even have some of those questions in the journal, those questions that Jesus asked people, and how would we respond in these conversations with Jesus.
Good.
So
Good.
I took, those questions and that background, that journalistic background, and pulled something together. Me as Jennifer Dukes Lee, I'm kind of like hidden. I'm just like this quiet narrator in the background.
Yes.
I'm
So
kind of
true.
giving you the backstory here,
Hmm.
but that's how it was formed, was from that journalistic style and that
Yeah.
interest in getting the answers to questions.
It really is a journey, because you start us with the central repository of all the people who have been a part of my life. And I I prefaced our conversation by reading that. And it's so interesting and so beautiful, because every person that you have encountered in one way or another has imprinted you, and so to start there is very therapeutic and very clinical even. It's just such a linear journey. So I definitely start clients there. Let's look at the map markers on your life map. And that's where you start. And I love that. And you tell us before you begin, this is what I really wanted to tell the Heartlifters. Step 1, commit to ruthless honesty and generous compassion. When you combine these two virtues, you end up with a more complete and charitable view towards yourself and others. I really love that. It's all about self-compassion. I love that you start there. When you say ruthless honesty in step 1 here, how would you define that?
Just getting in there and
getting
it out. And ruthless just sounds like a horrible word, but just like going through therapy can feel at times ruthless. But when
invasive.
you walk out the door, or you look back on the months of work that you've done in that room, you realize, man, it was hard and it was ruthless, but it was worth it. I am who I am today because I had the courage to go to those places. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to be really upfront with people. There are some really fun questions, well-timed, I hope, and well-placed to give people a little bit of levity in the midst of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But pause. In the end, give them a pause, give them permission to laugh and smile and remember just goofy, quirky things. But also, I just wanted people to know that there's courage involved here. There is ruthless, relentless kind of, I'm just going to do this thing. And so I just wanted to be completely upfront about that.
Even if you do it and burn it, a lot of times, I know 60 journals, if not more, up in bins in the closet upstairs. And I think when I look back at them, I'm like, I should really. But my older daughter is a writer, and the other two are like, no, don't burn them. I'm like, I think I might. Step 2 is choose your adventure. I love this. The journal is structured in a particular order, starting with your people, like I just said, because the people in your life have a tremendously powerful influence on your past, present, and future. Then you go through your past, your right now, and your weird ways, and then you deep dive into your most protected secrets in the section titled As Honest as I've Ever Been. And then you give us space to dream and decide what we want our future to look like, which until maybe the last 12, 16 months in my life, I don't think I ever had given myself permission to do that, or even the evangelicalism that I grew up, basically from 20 on, didn't give me permission to actually say what I want, what I think. When Jesus says, what do you need? That makes me start twitching. Because am I allowed to need?
That's so true.
It's so true. Step 3, upon completion, determine what's next. What will you do, like we just said, with this little book of secrets? You can hide it, bury it, burn it, trash it, paper mache it, mulch it, shred it, allow the dog to chew on it, rip it up, or put it in a time capsule. Oh, that idea. With strict instructions that it not be read until 2052. Oh my gosh, that is such a great idea. I love that. Okay, if you don't mind, before we move on with all the fun, deep, rich things within the journal, can we go back to your crisis of faith just for a moment? Because so many of us, so many in the world, so many in the church culture are in a time of deconstruction. We have heard that word being thrown around, reconstruction, renewal, whatever you want to call it. What did you learn during that deep dive into an interrogation of the scripture? What perhaps drew you back into your faith then? Maybe something you learned or gleaned would be beneficial to me. And I think so many.
I'd be happy to. This feels very redemptive for me, by the way.
Aww.
When I think about the amount of years that I went in utter doubt. Mm-hmm. And when I did come out of that doubt, I remember saying to the Lord, why would you let me be in that space for so long when I was begging a way out? Yeah. And now, only years later, do I see the fruit when I'm able to share a story like this and give other people hope. Wow. So thank you for an opportunity to share a little bit of that. So my doubts really hit to the core of what was true in the Bible. When I was probably 16, 17 years old, I had all but given up on the faith. Like intellectually, it just didn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also, this is going to sound weird and maybe nobody will relate, but I grew up in a small town where we knew everybody and where I faced death a lot.
Wow,
I
sure.
remember going into the Sleaford Funeral Home Chapel like weekly to see somebody else I knew, some old person who was laying there in a casket.
Gosh, it's so frightening.
Yeah, I mean, and it was just like again and again. So I was always given this opportunity to like question why is what is up with the body and where is our soul and why would God allow this to happen? And it was just a really hard thing for a child to process.
Yes.
And so I think that's kind of where it began. Then as I got older and began to intellectualize everything, it just didn't even make sense that Jesus walked out of a tomb. To me, it just didn't make sense. And then I got into
exactly.
Yeah, I got into news reporting, and I remember my favorite journalism professor, his famous line was, "If your mother says she loves you, double check it."
Oh,
right?
Of course. That sounds right. Yes.
So it's like double check everything.
Check the facts. Yes.
Make sure the facts are good. And so I really just left the faith entirely, but kept it a secret because I didn't want to be a disappointment to my family. At the same time, I was developing viewpoints politically and ways that I felt about the world that I was afraid didn't match up with the church where I grew up. And I couldn't separate Jesus from human beings in a church. It was like all
exactly
mashed up together. And so I'm like, I don't know if I believe that. I'm just not sure. I'm just trying to figure this stuff out on my own.
Right.
And so I left. But yeah, again, there was this tug all the time, like, I want to. And so when the internet finally came about, I would like in the darkness of night, Google, what do you do if you don't believe in God? I'd type this in and I'd get back these responses like, well, you just need to read the Bible. And I'm like, that's your propaganda piece. Of course you're going to say, read the Bible.
Sounds so familiar. Mm-hmm. You've done your devotion. Have you started your day with the devotion? Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. But I'm like, I know like in theory that's supposed to work, but I don't know how that's going to make me believe. It didn't make sense at the time. There were a few things I did. I remember being encountered with prophecy, the Old Testament prophesying the birth of Christ.
Yeah. And
it appealed to the intellectual in me because I'm like, that was written. Archaeologists, experts would agree these things were written 400, 500, 600, 700, 800 years before. Then this stuff was true. Like very specific things were true. Right. And so that was a huge entry point for me. Another huge entry point for me was The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel.
Yes.
And here was this journalist who, he was approaching it from a journalistic kind of perspective. Right. And then thirdly, I encountered Thomas in a whole new way in the Bible. Oh. And Thomas had been presented in my childhood as doubting Thomas. And I was like, I'm doubting Jennifer. But Jesus still enfolded him in the 12. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, he comes back and he's like, hey, here's the holes in my hands and on my side, check it out, Thomas. It's real. For yourself. Yeah. Check and so facts. I was like, he's good. Jesus, the church might not be good with my questions, but Jesus is good with my questions. He is. Finally, this was before there was, the word deconstruction that I knew of. But, I was essentially deconstructing. Yes. And in this deconstruction, I was able to reconstruct something where I was able to separate the reality of Christ and who he is from what I saw as hypocrisy in the church. Yeah, and the system. I was able to see Jesus for who he was and decide, how do I live like that? Yes. And keep my eyes on that. And then be a part of, in my own life, looking like the way I want church to look. And I'm not saying I do that perfectly. Mm-hmm. Right. None of us do. But it's my goal. Mm-hmm. And so that began the process, this questioning and this exploration. And in the end, the Bible was the way, even though I thought it was a propaganda piece. And then I started to experience God. He became, I started
Wow.
to sense the work of the Holy Spirit, and
Mm.
not in like weird woo-woo ways, but just like I am a part of something bigger and I am being held. I could feel it like suddenly when I was going through really difficult things, and suddenly I didn't feel despairing. I felt hopeful about a God who was not going to have me walk through it alone.
Yes. When you felt it, like is somatically, like in your body, or just it's just a presence, like you just know. So Jennifer, who was pre digging deep and reading and studying, how did that Jennifer feel different than an embodied presence of Christ in your life? I'm so curious.
By way of story, I'm always by way of story
That's
is
good. I
always
love
how I want
story.
to tell things. When I was a reporter, even when I was in the midst of doubt, I would listen to AM radio because I was tired of listening to the same CDs in my Toyota Camry. And I'd flip over to AM radio, and sometimes it would be a Christian station. The words were coming alive in a way that I hadn't felt before.
Yeah, okay.
And I couldn't quite make sense of that because I'd heard these verses before, but they were making sense to me. And then at the end, there would always be this like, no, if you don't know the Lord and you want to give your life to Jesus, this is the prayer that you should pray today. And so I would dutifully pray that prayer. I would just be like, okay, God, am I supposed to feel different right now? Because I didn't feel different. And so, a week later, I'd be on another news assignment and figure, well, I'll give my life to the Lord again. One of these times it's going to take.
I love it.
Right. But what I know now is like, I don't have like this neat mark, a little dot on the timeline that says, this is when I was saved.
Yes.
But I do know that on God's timeline, he always knew it.
Yes.
And so in moments when I think about, I felt his presence, kind of like the way you get little God bumps on your skin or something. Like, I just know he's here. That he's for sure been there. But in the same way, in those moments in my Toyota Camry, when I didn't feel any different at all, now, based on what I know about his character and based on what I know about his omnipresence and his omniscience, he was there.
He was.
Even if I couldn't feel him. And so I trust that now, which buoys me in times now, years down the road, when I don't necessarily feel him. I no longer have to rely on feelings to know that his presence is real. I have had some kinds of feelings in my body that make me feel that way. And I see those as gifts that God has given me to just be like, see, you fledgling little thing, I'm going to let you feel this thing. Yes. But I no longer need that in order to move forward.
Which is beautiful. And I just wanted my Heartlifters to hear that, because we are in a time where the church system is being examined. Perhaps even in the whole experience of COVID, I definitely went into what you did and just did a deep dive. And I'm like, I need to know who you really are, Jesus, because all the trappings are now shut down. I can no longer lean on this gift or this or this or that or the worship. It's just me and you. I wanted so desperately to carry that out of the COVID experience. I saw it as a wilderness, 3 years, and still ongoing in so many ways. But Heartlifters, as you hear Jennifer, just really hear that it isn't always a feeling. It is just, to me, it's an embodiment. It's just a movement of stability and security and trust. And that's just so beautiful. And you do help us explore that in the journal as well. It's an invitation to explore how we're feeling about so many different things. I love as well, in the beginning, you have, it's so investigative and so reporterish. It just makes sense that you did this for a living. Who's got your six? Okay, page 20. World War I pilots came up with the phrase, got your six. Oh, it's so good. In reference to the rear of an airplane, the 6 o'clock position. As a pilot, the 6 is what's behind you. It's the most vulnerable part of your plane, right? So when someone tells you they've got your 6, it means they've got your back. And so you invite us. This is what I was reading before we came on together. And I was like in my head already writing it down. This is who's got my 6. this is who's six I've got. It's just so good. And then you say, this is who makes me laugh the loudest. Immediately, I knew. No matter how long it's been, I can always pick up where I left off with this person. This is so endearing. And also, I feel like in a therapeutic way, it is a invitation to develop more intimacy in your life. Does that make sense? Was that a hope of yours?
Yes.
Of the connection to self, which is the most important precursor to be able to have intimacy with others?
Yes, absolutely. I don't say it because I don't want anybody to come into this journal as they move through the questions and think, well, this is the expected outcome. I have at the very beginning, like, look, this will lead to more self-discovery. I hope that you will treat yourself more empathetically. But after that introduction, I'm out of there. Like, you don't it's all about you. There's a section in there where I'm like, this is somebody who I hope I don't have to live next to in heaven. Like, I mean, that's a really honest question. Or this is who makes me cry mad tears.
Yes.
And like, I want people to be able to answer that with ruthless honesty. And I don't want to come around the backside and say, you really shouldn't feel that way. Or here's a
Have
Bible
you forgiven
verse.
that person?
Right. Like, I am trusting this kind of process. And I am trusting for those who go through it with the Holy Spirit that he will guide them through that. They don't need me to say, now this is what you got to do with that. Is that my hope? Yes.
Right. Or to examine it or correct it.
Yes, exactly.
Or perhaps like quietly judge it.
Right.
Or project shame onto it. Right.
Right. I mean, and that's why there's some really kind of people, there probably will be some people that are like, I can't believe she's asking me to answer that. Like, is that really okay if I have that feeling? I mean, like, I got a question in there, like, here's who might be shocked to see me in heaven. And we've all got those people. Oh, Jennifer, are you, I don't, are you really, are you a real Christian? Or, like, there are people who are going to be shocked to find me there. I have no doubt.
It's so good. I mean, my face really does hurt. I'm just really smiling so big. So good. And you bring in a lot of 2 points I wanted to go. This lost in translation part, which is so fun. A beautiful feature of language. And my daughter lives in South America. And so she has my first grandchild, my granddaughter, and she'll be bilingual. And, so I love that you brought in other words from other cultures. I think it's so fun because it does give us the vocabulary to describe what we're feeling and a way to express ourselves with precision. The English language includes thousands upon thousands of words, but sometimes there isn't a perfect, succinct English word for what we feel. And when I was in Uruguay, South America, and I would say something like, we don't have a word for that, but we have this word. And they would tell me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so much better. Where does that come from for you? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, where it came from for me is actually a word from South America.
Oh.
It's a word that I learned when I was in first grade. We had a Brazilian exchange student. And when I was young, she taught me the word saudade. And it's a Portuguese word that means like a longing for somebody that you can't see or a longing for something that you might never experience again.
Oh.
And so she taught me that word, and she said, and it made me very sad when I was little because she said that she had saudade, like as we were leaving, that she had this experience when she was leaving that she was going to have saudade for me. And so I took Portuguese later when I was in college. And there's longing is kind of the same sort of a word. Yeah. And the nostalgia is kind of like it, but it's not exactly the same. So when saudade is a beautiful word. And so I began to explore other words like it. One of my favorites in the book is Kummerspeck. It's a German word, and my apologies to anybody listening that actually knows how to pronounce that.
Exactly. Yes.
But the term Kummerspeck translates to literally grief bacon, like bacon that you eat.
Oh my word.
And so Kummerspeck is a term to describe weight gained due to emotional overeating. Grief bacon.
Wow.
I've eaten some grief bacon in my life.
I have eaten some
Yeah.
recently some grief bacon.
Now, are you
Exactly.
more of a grief bacon that's more of like a sweets, or like or are you more like, grab a cookie, or are you more like just give me another helping of mashed potatoes?
It would be, that's very fascinating. It Grief bacon could look like just a whole half gallon of gelato. Just got back, right? So had gelato every night. Thick and creamy stracciatella with big pieces of European chocolate, or it can look like a huge plate of mac and cheese.
There you go. I think
And
I could I could go either
when
way.
I'm in grief, and I mean, I think the mac and cheese might weigh out more just because it's like,
Comfort
yeah,
food.
comfort. Yeah. Because I think of grief, I think of a blanket and like a little higgy, a little HYGGE, comfort
Oh
and
yeah.
candle lighting and yeah,
Yeah. And
just
that word's in
hot
here
cup of,
too.
oh, higgy, yes, where? Do
Yeah,
you know?
because that's a Danish word, and
Yes.
it's like cozying up around a fire, or the soft
Yeah.
glow of
Mhm.
candlelight. It's like this cozy, comfortable feeling when you're in a warm, inviting atmosphere, like
Yes.
enjoying good things with good people. And so there's not really an exact word for that one as well in
Mm-mm.
English.
No, there isn't. Why do you think, Jennifer, that it is so critically important to write our words down?
Yeah. So I see journaling as thinking on paper. And sometimes we will not even think about it, but when we put pen to paper, it causes us to think and process in ways that we might just kind of put the hand to the plow and forget about it, or maybe just eat a bunch of grief bacon and not really process, right?
Yeah.
It's like a sanctuary. Journaling is like a sanctuary for your thoughts, for your
Beautiful.
emotions, for your spiritual
Mm.
reflections. It's more than just putting pen to paper. And I really want to
Mhm.
emphasize that, because it's also more than having it sound pretty on the page
Mhm.
or looking a certain way that is Instagrammable. It is really a sacred act of self-discovery, and also connecting with God, in relationship with God, to reach that level of intimacy where you're just like, I just got some things on my mind and I want to share it with you, or here's my
Mhm.
3 things that I'm grateful for today. I mean, that's journaling. Like making
It
a
is.
list of
Mhm.
gratitudes is journaling. That counts. Bulleted lists of things that you did today is journaling. That
Mhm.
counts. Writing down your prayers is journaling. That counts.
Mhm.
Writing down your worries is journaling. That counts. So all of those things, in some ways they help you declutter your mind, because you're just taking them from up here
Yes,
and
just
putting
a
them
word
down on
dump.
people. Some of them are deepening a connection with God, saying, "Hey, thank you for this. Thank you for these things I'm grateful for." Some are, unveiling an inner truth that you maybe didn't even really realize that you were feeling until you actually
Mhm.
put it down. So there's so many benefits, like, I mean, benefit upon benefit. And
Mhm.
I would love, I mean, just to kind of turn it around a minute, because I know how much you love journaling.
I
I
do.
would love to hear what you think, because I'm learning from fellow journalers. So if you wouldn't mind, would you
Yes.
share how you benefit from journaling?
Yes, I think primarily it gets it out of my body. So
Mm.
it helps me detach, especially if it's something painful, which has been my history. Having grown up in an alcoholic family, I remember writing in my diary as a little girl, and it would be a lot of, I don't understand. Why is this? So for me, it's been more of an interrogation about my family system, right? But I think that it just gets it out of your body and enables you to have a safe place if you don't have a safe place. So a journal to me is sacred. It's my sacred space where I meet with God on the paper, and I write to dear God, or dear Lord or Jesus, whoever is, Spirit of God, whichever part of the Trinity is more needed at that moment. I also, after having taught writing, I also see that it is an awakening. And so for me, yeah, that it's just my safe space that I didn't have in my family of origin to say what I wanted to say,
Mhm.
because before we started, you and I were talking about, growing up in an evangelical system. I don't think it was on tape. I don't remember, but I don't think it was. If it was, just hear me again, where just hear it again. I didn't know I that I could think for myself, that I could speak for myself, that I had value as a woman, as a female, and was shut down time and time and time and time again to make me, it's not like I made it up. It literally happened. Helps to validate that you have a voice and that you have worth and that God wants to hear from you. So I think it's a critical practice. I really do. And you've already mentioned, there are so many research articles out that prove what happens when we connect writing to our thoughts and getting it down in journaling. And I'll post a few on our show notes for everyone.
I love that.
Yeah.
I've found, I don't know if you found this too, especially when you're talking about your past and that your childhood. I know that for me, sometimes I not only do I regret things in my past that like, I wish that wouldn't have happened in my family, or I wish this wouldn't have happened in the way that somebody treated me. It has helped me to understand things that I did. Like until I actually write it down, I do not treat like 16-year-old Jennifer very empathetically.
No.
I can almost, if I'm not careful, I can almost treat young Jennifer like a broken, messed up version of who I am now. And thank God I'm not her anymore if I don't process it. But when I process it, for instance, I have like write a letter to your younger self. When I process it and talk to her, I treat her so much better.
Yes.
Like, you made it.
Yes.
Thank you for, you went through that hard thing, but you bounced back up again and you grew from that, Jennifer. Don't worry. It's going to get better. It's not always going to be this way. And also thank you, young Jennifer, for making that really hard decision. How in the world did you think to do that at 22 years old? Because of what you did at 22, that when you said no to that job and moved somewhere and everybody thought you were crazy, now look where you are. You wouldn't be, this Jennifer would not be here if it weren't for you. So it's helped me to create or build rather empathy for my younger self that I didn't have before I started writing her letters.
Yes, it's absolutely true. And for yesterday's self, I mean, I just journaled yesterday. It was Sunday here. And I haven't journaled in quite a while because, it takes energy.
It does.
It does. It takes courage, like you just said, to sit down and write something down that perhaps you're feeling that your inner voices, that whole committee of inner critics in your brain is going, shame on you, shame on you, shame on you. You shouldn't say that. And like we said a minute ago, well, what do you mean you don't want her to be next to you in heaven? Did you forgive her? Have you worked through the stages of forgiveness? Right? I mean, it's hard to put it down on paper, but if you don't, it's going to stay embodied in your presence. And that's why it's stuff you would only tell God. It's just such a great title as well. I was like, what? Yes. Yes. And the subtitle, A Guided Journal of Courageous Honesty. We've been talking about radical honesty here on the show as well. Obsessive Truth-Telling, talked about that. And Beautifully Ruthless Self-Discovery. The positioning of these words. How long did it take you to position them that way, Jennifer?
Oh, I have a fun story about that.
I want to hear.
I wish I could go back and tell you what we were talking about all kinds of subtitles and they were just like, they weren't good. Mine weren't good. The publishers weren't good. We're having a hard time.
It's a hard
and
job.
Scott and I were sitting watching like Survivor or something on a Wednesday night. And I was sitting on the couch, like not paying attention. I had my phone. I'm like taking note. I'm like, Scott, pause the show. I've got it. And it was just like, it just in my notes app. I'm like, this is what it is.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And so then I quick emailed my team. I'm like, how about it, guys? Do you think this works? And they're like, yes. Finally. And now people comment on the subtitle all the time, but the other one was really bad. It was bad.
So thank you so much for telling us the importance of journaling, inciting us to have courage and bravery. To set apart the time is another strong deterrent to make the time in our productive, hyper-productive, actually, culture that most of us live in and are trying, at least I'm trying to reduce the tempo of my life. How do you set aside time to journal? Do you have a specific strategy or is it just go with the flow?
I would say it's more of a seasonal strategy. I'll go through periods of journaling things at night or journaling things in the morning. My current practice is as follows. I have several journals. I maybe won't use them all every day, but
Mhm.
I have, of course, stuff I'd only tell God, which I'm going through myself.
Fun.
Yeah, it is, because I answered them all as I wrote them, but it's
Sure.
something different to write it down with a pen in the morning. I also have a commonplacing journal that I keep, and that is a journal. It's kind of, it has ancient, I mean, like it was
Gorgeous.
really like the Renaissance era was what really when it
Yeah.
became popular, where you'd write quotes or ideas or poems that you'd read. And so I have the commonplacing journal where it's others' ideas. It's not
Mhm.
anything that's original to me.
Mhm.
And then I have another journal where they're just like little snippets of kind of life that
Mhm.
they wouldn't make a very good paragraph on a blog post or in a book, but they're just things that I'm thinking and feeling. And then I
Yeah.
also have a prayer journal. And
Wow.
I have, right now, my prayer journal is praying the scriptures over my children. Go through, I'm a new empty nester, and I've got kids that I've
Oh,
realized my parenting has changed so much that
so much.
so much. And so prayer is like the main way that I parent, which I'm not saying I wasn't parenting that way before,
No,
but
no, I get
when
it.
you literally can't do
Mhm.
anything but pray, you definitely pray.
How old are your kids?
Definitely pray. A freshman and a junior in college.
Wow, you're there. You're
Yeah.
right in that transition to adulting. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
tough.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with journaling right now. We're going to go on vacation, and who knows what it'll look like then. I don't really like get too rigid about it, which is interesting because I'm like a type A Enneagram 3.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Yeah, like
Yep.
okay, these things are supposed to happen this way. But in journaling, I found that that's an area where I just
You have to set
do
free.
whatever leads and just try
Mhm.
to have fun with it and not make it a chore.
Yeah, and I love some of the journals, and yours is actually integrates in the sense where you don't write a whole page, you just one line. I love the one line mom journals, like the 5-minute journal. So if you're not a writer, or if you're not someone who likes to write, because I've absolutely had clients who are like, I don't want to write. I'm like, but we are going to, because
Mhm.
it is such a critical practice to at least get it down on paper. So in your journal, a lot of them are one line or just enough room for a couple
Yeah.
lines. I
And
love
there's
that.
some in there that's like yes or no. Like,
Exactly. Yes.
here's one that you could unpack a whole therapy session out of. One of the questions in the yes or no is, I am often misunderstood.
Oh,
Yes or no. And so, however you answer that question, especially if I think a lot of people would answer yes,
mhm.
then okay, let's unpack that, right? And so I
Yeah.
think that even just by circling the why
Yeah.
on the Y or the N and acknowledging
Mhm.
people misunderstand me will have you processing,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
hopefully that will lead you to a place of healing.
Yeah, and it's very introspective. And I think when you do sit with the word of God with you as well, a lot of times
Yeah.
I will just start with a scripture and then look up what it means in the Greek or do this or that. And then it just leads on such a beautiful exploration of your mind, your heart, your soul, and your body. And that's what you're offering us here. It's such an opportunity of growth, mind, body, soul, and spirit. Heartlifters, we're going to stop here with part 1, but stay tuned for a very short, special question and answer time that Jennifer and I have with each other, using some of the prompts from her beautiful book, Stuff I'd Only Tell God. But for today, I just wanted to close and give you some encouragement about journaling from another beautiful book by Adele Ahlberg Calhoun, Spiritual Disciplines Handbook, Practices That Transform Us, revised and expanded. I use this book and love it so much. And she writes, in a consumer society, it's easy to accumulate experiences, believing the more we have, the better. Yet experiences don't necessarily bring wisdom, nor do they automatically transform us. We need to listen and reflect on our experiences in the presence of the Holy Spirit to learn from them. Journaling is a way of paying attention to our lives, a way of knitting the vast ball of our experiences into something with shape that attests to the state of our soul. Frederick Bruckner reminds us in listening to your life, there is no chance thing through which God cannot speak. On the pages of a journal, in the privacy of a moment, we can take tentative steps into truth and scour our feelings, hurts, ideas, and struggles before God. Over time, repetitious themes, sins, compulsions, hopes, and concerns emerge. We begin to recognize our besetting sins, our limitations, and our desires. During times of transition, travel, loss, joy, illness, and decision-making, journaling can provide a way of processing the hopes, fears, longings, angers, and prayers of our heart. It can be the place we sound off before God so we don't sound off in an inappropriate way to others. I want to leave you with that prompt that Jennifer and I talked about. The 6. Who's got your 6? She writes on page 20, in Stuff I'd Only Tell God, World War I pilots came up with the phrase, got your 6, in reference to the rear of an airplane, the 6 o'clock position. As a pilot, the 6 is what's behind you. It's the most vulnerable part of your plane. So, when someone tells you they've got your 6, it means they've got your back. The prompt for our journal writing this week then is, this is who's got my 6. This is whose 6 I've got. Okay, Heartlifters, this is so good for our summer of slowing it down, of having more serenity and practicing stillness, silence, and solitude. Meet me over at Janell Reardon on Instagram. Until next time.
Thanks for listening today. It was great having you here. For even more great content and resources, please join the Stronger Everyday online community at janellreardon.com. Always remember, you, my friend, have value, worth, and dignity.